I don't care who your father is. The flight attendant's voice cracked like a whip, loud enough to turn heads across the boarding gate. First class isn't for kids like you. Arielle Brooks froze mid-step, her boarding pass trembling in her hand. Behind her, Anaya let out a sharp breath, her phone already unlocked, thumb hovering over one name in her contacts. Just one call. They had no idea that one phone call would ground 3 airlines, freeze $940 million in federal contracts, and force the entire U.S. aviation industry to rewrite how it treated children, especially black girls. Before we go further, tell us where you're watching from. And if you believe justice has no age limit, hit that like button and subscribe, because what happens next is going to leave you speechless. Arielle didn't blink, not when the gate agent squared his shoulders to block the entrance to the jet bridge, not when he glanced at her with the same tight-lipped condescension she'd seen all morning, not even when he gestured for security with 2 sharp fingers. What broke her, what cracked that last sliver of her dignity, was how casually he said it. Kids like you. Anaya stepped forward. Sir, we have first-class seats. Our dad booked them. I said back of the line, the man cut her off. Unless you'd like to be escorted out entirely. He didn't look at their names. He didn't scan their tickets. He didn't even ask for ID. He didn't have to. In his eyes, they didn't belong. Not in line, not in first class, not in this space, in this way, with this quiet confidence that said, we're allowed to be here, and that was the part people like him couldn't handle. Just 1 hour earlier, things were different. The twins had arrived at Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport early, bouncing with energy and matching hoodies, jeans, and navy blue backpacks. Arielle had braided both their hair the night before, tight box braids with silver cuffs at the ends. They looked sharp, ready, like 2 girls who knew where they were going, because they did. This trip was about more than a college robotics event in Boston. It was about independence. It was about proving to their father, Dr. Theodore Brooks, that they could do this, that he didn't have to hover, didn't have to micromanage every step of their lives just because mom was gone and he was all they had left. And besides, they'd rehearsed everything. Gate changes, delays, lost bags. What they hadn't rehearsed was being made to feel invisible. The problems started at check-in. The white agent at the counter never even looked up. Next, he said, staring past the girls. A white couple behind them stepped forward. The agent smiled. You're headed to Chicago? Great time of year. Excuse me, Arielle said politely. We were actually next in line. The smile vanished. You'll wait your turn. But we've been standing here for 15 minutes, Anaya added. The agent's eyes narrowed. I'll be with you when I'm ready. By the time he finally motioned them forward, he was visibly irritated. He took their tickets and IDs with 2 fingers, not scanning them, just squinting. First class, he scoffed. Are you sure you're at the right counter? Arielle's voice was calm. Yes, our dad booked these. Right, well, something's off. I'll need to check these. He vanished behind a side door. When he returned 10 minutes later, he slapped 2 new boarding passes onto the counter. You've been reassigned to economy, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Excuse me, Anaya said, reaching for the passes. These aren't the seats our father booked. The man leaned in, voice low. Look, I don't know what kind of scam you 2 are trying to run, but first class isn't for everyone. You should be grateful you're flying at all. They stared at him. He stared back. No apology, no explanation. Just quiet authority and the full weight of you don't belong here. TSA wasn't better. Selected for random screening, luggage tossed, hair searched, medication questioned. One TSA officer even muttered, "Gotta check these elaborate styles. You'd be surprised what people hide in there." When Arielle asked him to be careful with her laptop, he scraped it harder across the metal table. "You don't like how I'm doing my job. Maybe you shouldn't be flying." It wasn't random, it wasn't subtle, and it wasn't okay. But the final blow came at the gate. Gate C7. They had their updated boarding passes, still first class, after pleading with a customer service rep at another desk. No apology, no eye contact, just reprinted tickets and a muttered, "Try again." They tried. And then came the man in the blazer, the flight attendant who took one look at them and saw a threat, a lie, a challenge. He didn't ask questions. He just blocked the door and spoke those words. "First class isn't for kids like you." And then, "I don't care who your father is." Anaya's hand was shaking now, thumb still frozen over the phone screen. Arielle didn't need to say anything. She nodded once. Anaya pressed call. Dr. Theodore Brooks answered on the first ring. He was in a secure room in Washington, D.C., surrounded by engineers, government liaisons, and executives from the FAA. They were discussing a technical upgrade to the federal boarding matrix. Nothing urgent. Nothing he couldn't walk away from. He listened in silence. He asked for the gate number, the name of the flight, the time. Then he said just one sentence. "Stay where you are. Keep your phones on. Everything is about to change." He stood up, entered his private authentication key, and typed 6 words that would shift the entire airline industry. "Activate GLOW protocol, level 3 lock." Back at gate C7, the flight boards began to flicker. Strange yellow frames appeared around dozens of departure lines. Digital gate scanners stopped working. Boarding came to a crawl, then to a halt. 3 airlines, 22 airports, $940 million in frozen contracts, 1 father, 1 call, and 2 girls who weren't invisible anymore. The silence at gate C7 was strange, thick, electric. It didn't come from the usual kind of flight delay. No baby crying, no gate agent announcing a change, no storm. Just an eerie pause, like the air itself was waiting. Arielle glanced up at the departure board again. Flight 6047. Boarding. Then suddenly, the green status blinked yellow, then gray, then nothing. The gate agent's tablet stopped responding. He tapped it harder, muttering. The other flight attendants whispered into walkies. Behind the girls, passengers started murmuring. "System's glitching. Wasn't this the flight to Boston? What's happening?" Anaya lowered her phone, her voice quiet. "Dad said stay where we are." Arielle gave a small nod, but her stomach flipped. Not because she didn't trust him. She did, more than anyone. But the thing was, even she didn't fully know what her dad was capable of. Not yet. Inside the FAA's East Control Command in Washington, D.C., the atmosphere had changed from mundane to critical in 60 seconds flat. Dr. Theodore Brooks stood in front of the National Boarding Infrastructure map. Every time a flight gate across 22 federal airports scanned a passenger, it pinged this very system. Usually, it was about optimization, scheduling, capacity balancing, rerouting in case of weather. But today, Brooks didn't care about optimization. He cared about accountability. He entered his second-level clearance code. Then he tapped into the system's unpublicized function, GLOW, Gate Level Override Warning Protocol. The original purpose? To suspend a boarding gate in case of cyber attack or physical security breach. Today, he used it to shut down people's arrogance, the arrogance of thinking black children didn't deserve dignity. He selected the airline, then the gate, then the crew ID numbers, pulled from real-time logs. Final step. Reason code, ETH-04. Discriminatory denial. Then came the command, execute lockdown. Back in Phoenix, the fallout started almost instantly. Folks, it looks like we're experiencing some technical difficulties with the boarding system, the gate agent said, trying to sound casual. We'll get things moving again shortly. Passengers shifted, annoyed. One woman with a Gucci tote rolled her eyes. This better not delay me. I have a 2 p.m. in Boston. Another passenger, An older man in a Red Sox cap was watching the two girls, noticing how calm they were. "Hey kids," he said gently. "You all right?" Arielle turned. She was used to being asked that question by well-meaning strangers. She just nodded, but before she could say more, an overhead chime rang out across the entire terminal. It wasn't a boarding chime. It wasn't a flight announcement. It was a system-wide alert tone, the kind no one had heard before. All at once, large red banners appeared on every terminal screen. "Boarding system lockdown initiated. Technical clearance required. Please remain at your gate. Airline personnel will provide updates shortly." At that exact moment, inside a meeting room at Sky Horizon Airlines headquarters in Atlanta, chaos erupted. "Who authorized a GLOW lockdown?" a VP barked, pointing at a frozen screen. "Why are only our flights affected? Is this a system error?" But it wasn't an error. It was targeted. 3 airlines, all sharing the same gate crew rotation system, all with previous civil complaints involving discrimination flagged in the past year. And now they were paralyzed. Planes full of passengers sat on tarmacs waiting for clearance. Dozens of flights couldn't board. Check-in counters started rejecting digital IDs. Mobile apps crashed. Worse, investors noticed. Back at Gate C7, the man in the navy blazer, the same one who told the girls they didn't belong, looked like someone had pulled the floor out from under him. He paced. He cursed. He slammed his tablet onto the gate podium. Anaya watched, arms folded. "Still don't care who our dad is?" she whispered under her breath. Arielle nudged her gently. "We don't gloat." "I'm not gloating," Anaya replied. "I'm witnessing karma." They were both right. What was happening wasn't revenge. It was exposure. The whole world now saw what it looked like when an entire system was built to devalue certain people, and what it looked like when someone with power said, "Not anymore." In DC, Brooks wasn't done. His assistant, a quick-thinking analyst named Maya Shu, walked into the room holding a report. "Sir, media's already picking it up. Someone posted a TikTok of the screen freeze at Sky Harbor. It's at 200K views in 30 minutes. Brooks didn't flinch. "Good. Sir, you sure you want to keep all 22 sites under lockdown?" He turned to her. "If my daughters, children, are being humiliated in plain view, then the industry can sit and stew for an hour. Maybe then they'll understand the cost of silence." Maya paused. "You're going to get calls from airline executives." "I'll take them," he said, "after they explain why gate crews across 3 states can't treat 2 young black girls with basic decency." Meanwhile, a reporter from a local news station had arrived at Gate C7. She was young, Latina, and fast. "Can I ask what happened?" she said softly to Arielle. Arielle looked to her sister. Anaya shrugged. Arielle spoke clearly, the way her father taught her. "They told us we didn't belong in first class. They didn't check our names. They didn't check our tickets. They just looked at us and decided." The reporter blinked. "Do you have footage of that?" "We have everything," Anaya said, pulling up her phone. "From check-in to now." The reporter turned back to her cameraman. "Start rolling." In under 2 hours, hashtags started trending. Boarding. While black #first class daughters #glow. Protocol, people were angry, not just at the airline, but at how normal this kind of discrimination had become. Aviation forums lit up. Investors held emergency meetings. FAA officials were summoned to explain the GLOW system's unexpected activation. But more than that, parents everywhere saw their own kids in Arielle and Anaya. The image of 2 confident, polite, black girls being humiliated at a gate they had every right to board hit a national nerve. Back in Silver Spring, their father's inbox exploded. Some messages were angry. Some were desperate. Some were apologetic. But one stood out. It came from an airline CEO whose company had just been frozen out of 3 international airports due to the protocol's cascade effect. The email read, "Dr. Brooks, we had no idea your daughters were on that flight." His reply was short. You shouldn't have had to. That night, as the twins sat safely back in Maryland, Arielle scrolled through the news. Her face was calm, but her hands were still. Anaya leaned over, frowning. "You okay?" Arielle nodded. "Yeah, She hesitated, then finally said it. "Do you ever wonder if we have to be God-level perfect just to be treated like we belong?" Anaya looked at her sister, her voice soft. "No, I think we just have to stop letting them forget that we already do." And somewhere, in between the headlines, the protests, and the financial reports, the world began to remember. Arielle sat cross-legged on the carpet of their living room, laptop balanced on her knees. Across from her, Anaya hunched over her iPad, editing subtitles on the video they'd just uploaded. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of notifications, each one a new comment, a new repost, a new person who now knew exactly what happened at Gate C7. "It hit 1 million views," Anaya said softly, eyes wide. Arielle didn't respond at first. She was watching their own faces on the screen, the frozen clip of that moment when the gate agent blocked them. "First class isn't for kids like you." That sentence echoed through the video like a drumbeat, and now it echoed through the internet. Earlier that day, they had uploaded the raw footage to a shared drive. By the time they'd edited a concise 2-minute video with timestamps, receipts, and clear captions, it spread like wildfire. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, mom blogs, aviation forums, morning shows. But what shocked the girls the most wasn't how far the video went. It was who started sharing it. Students, teachers, veterans, pilots, celebrities. Even a former U.S. Secretary of Transportation retweeted it with the caption, "This is why we need the Passenger Ethics Act. This is why we listen to our children." And then came the flood of messages. One came from a woman named Layla Moss, a 44-year-old black airline pilot with over 19 years in the cockpit. Her voice cracked over video chat. "I've flown thousands of passengers, but the number of times I've been told, 'Are you sure you're the pilot?' You two reminded me why I stayed." Another message was from a white father in Texas. He wrote, "My daughters are blonde and blue-eyed. No one ever questions their place in first class. I'm so sorry. I'm teaching them about you two this week." The girls read every message. Some made them laugh. Some made them cry. Some made them feel like maybe this story wasn't just theirs anymore. By evening, Dr. Brooks returned home. He didn't speak right away. He just hugged each daughter long, tight, without words. Then he handed them a folder. Inside, a letterhead from the Department of Transportation. Top line, Emergency Industry Ethics Session. Subject, Passenger Discrimination, Minor Passenger Rights, GLOW. Activation Protocol. "Wait," Anaya said slowly. "Are they calling a hearing?" He nodded. "They want me to testify." Arielle blinked. "About the protocol?" "No," he said. "About you." Meanwhile, across the country, the airline executives weren't sleeping. In a sleek conference room in New York, the CEO of Metrofly, one of the affected carriers, was pacing. "I don't care what their father does," she snapped. "This entire thing was a PR ambush." An advisor cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we have to accept that this isn't just bad press. This is a systems-level incident. We've lost digital boarding clearance at 8 airports." The legal team pulled up a map. Red markers across Denver, Phoenix, Atlanta, JFK, DC, Seattle, LAX, and Chicago. "Shareholders are panicking," another exec added. "The ethics rating drop triggered ESG fund freeze protocols. That's hundreds of millions in suspended credit." The room fell silent. One woman leaned forward. "What do we do?" Nobody had an answer. 2 days later, a senior FAA official arrived in Silver Spring to visit the Brooks family in person. He was polite. His suit was crisp, his posture formal, but his tone was careful, almost pleading. "We'd like to avoid this escalating to a congressional investigation," he said. Dr. Brooks just raised an eyebrow. "You want me to stop the public from asking questions?" he said. "You want my daughters to go quiet?" "No, sir. We're asking if there's a way to collaborate on long-term reform." The twins watched the exchange from the hallway, half invisible. It felt strange. They were just trying to get to a robotics tournament, and now they were the reason an entire federal system was scrambling. But then again, maybe that's how change starts, in the most ordinary of moments. That weekend, Arielle and Anaya were invited to speak on a national podcast hosted by a young black journalist named Zuri Lane. The topic? Power, youth, and the price of visibility. Zuri leaned into the mic. "What do you want people to take away from this, now that the whole country's watching?" Anaya was the first to answer. "We didn't want fame. We just wanted fairness." Arielle added, "And we want people to stop acting like kids, especially black girls. Don't notice when we're being treated like we don't matter." Zuri nodded slowly. "You said something in your video about how people didn't think you belonged. Do you feel like you do now?" Arielle smiled for the first time that day. "I've always belonged. They're just finally seeing it." That evening, as they sat together under the stars on their back porch, Anaya turned to her sister. "Do you ever think about Mom?" Arielle was quiet. "Every day. I think she would have loved what we did," Anaya said, eyes watery but calm. Arielle nodded. "She always said, 'Never let anyone clip your wings. You come from something bigger than fear.'" Then she added quietly, almost in a whisper, "She used to say, 'Even God listens when black girls speak with purpose.'" Anaya leaned her head on her sister's shoulder, and for a moment, the sky didn't feel so big. It felt reachable. Meanwhile, at a private summit in Washington, federal ethics officials, airline CEOs, and civil rights lawyers gathered in an unprecedented emergency roundtable. One speaker took the mic. "Let's be honest. These girls didn't break the system. They revealed it." They passed a resolution that night. Mandatory ethics training for all gate and cabin crews. Real-time discrimination flagging inside the boarding infrastructure. A permanent passenger dignity index. It was named after the girls, the Brooks Protocol. And just like that, the story stopped being about two sisters. It became about everyone who had ever been told you don't belong, and finally heard someone say back, "Yes, we do." Marcus Brooks walked into the boardroom of Mid-Atlantic Airlines with a silence so sharp it cut through conversation before he even spoke. 12 executives sat around a polished oak table, flanked by glass windows that overlooked the city skyline. Each of them had received the same emergency memo that morning. Chairman Marcus Brooks has called a closed-door session regarding systemic passenger ethics violations. Attendance mandatory. No media. No legal counsel. The last time this kind of memo went out, an entire logistics wing was disbanded overnight. This time, they weren't sure if the airline itself would survive. Marcus didn't sit. He stood at the head of the table, dropped a leather binder in front of him, and opened it without looking up. Silence. Then, "You denied my daughters." No one answered. He looked at the VP of Passenger Services. "I'm not here for apologies. I'm here for the timeline of how two 13-year-old black girls were flagged, interrogated, and denied access on a pre-cleared, federally secured flight." The VP's throat tightened. "Mr. Brooks, we didn't realize they were your—" He cut her off. "That's exactly the problem." Back in Silver Spring, Arielle and Anaya weren't waiting around. They were already working with their school media advisor to prep for a live-stream town hall. Their social accounts had gained nearly 300,000 new followers. One post, a single image of the gate agent's hand blocking their path, had become the symbol of an entire movement. Had let them board. Wings. Denied. We belong. Here. And as expected, backlash was rising too. Anaya scrolled through the comments. "They're just kids. Why drag politics into this? This isn't racism, it's policy. Their dad's a CEO, they're not oppressed." Arielle leaned in. "You okay?" Anaya gave a half nod. "Yeah, I hate that people only believe us because of who Dad is." Arielle paused. "But isn't that the point? If this happened to us, with our name, our connections, what's happening to kids who don't have that?" In the boardroom, Marcus was still reading. "Flight 246, Gate C7, time stamped at 8:41 a.m. He flipped the page. "First denial at pre-board. Second at ID verification. Third at the gate. That's 3 separate opportunities for a human being to say, 'This isn't right.'" He turned to the head of risk and compliance. "You know what happened instead?" No one spoke. They saw 2 black girls, alone, in first class, and defaulted to suspicion. A younger executive finally found his voice. "We'll revise the internal bias training. We can build in new safeguards." "I'm not interested in workshops," Marcus said coldly. "I'm interested in accountability." 2 hours later, an encrypted command was transmitted from Marcus's private terminal. It triggered a series of cascading events across airline partner systems. Federal passenger clearance sync was revoked for Metrofly, Fly East, and Westlink Airlines. Credit freeze protocols locked down $940 million in ESG-backed infrastructure loans. Operational trust scores plummeted, automatically suspending flight activity at 12 partner airports, all of it legal, all of it traceable, all of it justified. And no one, not even the FAA, could override it. Because Marcus hadn't acted as a father. He had acted as the final ethics governor of the GAL-OW system, a network he helped design over a decade ago to monitor discriminatory practices across digital boarding systems. And today, he used it exactly as it was meant to be used. News broke within 37 minutes. CNBC ran the headline, "940 million frozen in airline credit fallout as passenger ethics crisis escalates." The Washington Post followed. "Industry ethics network triggered by viral video of black teen twins denied first-class boarding." And then came the investor calls. Stocks for all 3 affected airlines dropped 11% by midday. Internal chat logs leaked. FAA issued a public statement. ESG compliance boards opened emergency hearings, all because 2 little girls tried to get to a robotics tournament and weren't believed. At home, Arielle and Anaya were trying to process it all. The power, the reach, the sudden feeling that they had changed something far bigger than themselves. "I feel like I don't even know what's happening anymore," Anaya whispered, pulling her knees to her chest. "You don't have to know," Arielle said gently. "We're not supposed to fix the whole world. But maybe we cracked something open." There was a long pause. Then Anaya looked up, voice barely audible. "Do you think Mom would be proud?" Arielle nodded slowly, fighting tears. "I think God sent her strength through us." And for a second, neither girl said anything. They didn't have to. That same night, Marcus stood alone on the roof of Mid-Atlantic's HQ. He wasn't looking out at the skyline. He was staring at a faded photo in his hand, one of his wife holding both daughters as toddlers, their curly heads resting against her shoulder. He remembered her words, so many times before she passed. "If the sky closes its doors to our girls, you make sure you open them." Now, that moment had come, and he didn't just open the door. He tore it off the hinges. The next morning, Mid-Atlantic Airlines issued an unprecedented statement. No PR spin, no vague language, just a headline that echoed across the nation. "We failed to listen. We'll never make that mistake again." The message laid out 3 points. Acknowledgement of systemic failure. Full implementation of the Brooks Protocol. Mandatory equity checkpoints at every gate. Permanent ban of employees involved. And a direct partnership with youth advocacy groups. The girls were never named. Their father wasn't mentioned. But everyone knew who the message was for. By the time they returned to school, Arielle and Anaya weren't just the girls from the video. They were leaders. Teachers asked them to speak. Local media wanted interviews. Even classmates who had once teased them for being too serious now whispered when they walked into the cafeteria. And yet, they stayed grounded. No matter how loud the world gets, their father told them, you stay focused on your voice. And they did. Because they understood something now, something many adults still hadn't learned. Being believed is a privilege. Using your voice is a duty, and from now on, they would never be silent again. By Friday morning, the school gym had been turned into something Arielle and Anaya had never seen before. A press staging area. Rows of folding chairs filled the court. Ring lights glowed. Backdrops with the school's robotics logo stood next to banners that read, Silver Spring Future Tech Girls, National Finalists. For the first time since the flight incident, the twin sisters were going to speak publicly, not just as students, but as the faces of something much larger than a competition. Principal Evans met them at the entrance. You girls ready? She asked, smoothing her blazer nervously. Arielle nodded. As we'll ever be. Anaya glanced toward the cameras. Do we have to answer questions? Principal Evans smiled. Only the ones you want. That was the first time since the airport that either of them felt like they had a choice. The press conference opened with a short video highlighting the girls' robotics work. Clips of them wiring circuit boards, testing drone algorithms, coding in Python. It wasn't about trauma. It was about talent. And when they finally walked up to the podium together, matching silver jackets, tight braids, and calm fire in their eyes, the room hushed. Arielle spoke first. We came here today because we're more than what happened at that gate. Anaya continued. We're builders, problem solvers. We write code, we design systems. That's who we are. Arielle took a breath. But we also understand that systems, if left unchecked, can become walls. We're here to build doors instead. The crowd erupted in applause. Meanwhile, in Atlanta, a different room fell into silence. Inside the corporate headquarters of Fly East Airlines, a boardroom full of executives stared at a giant screen showing CNN's live coverage of the girl's speech. The CFO shifted in his seat. We're still locked out of all glow-linked terminals? The compliance director nodded. Mid-Atlantic's system controls access to 12 airports, 4 payment gateways, and 6 ESG lenders, all of them frozen. Because of 2 teenagers? Someone muttered. No, the CEO said grimly. Because those 2 teenagers have leverage, and we gave them the reason to use it. Back in Silver Spring, the energy around Arielle and Anaya had shifted. Students who used to walk past them now stopped to say things like, You made us proud. I told my little sister about you. I signed the petition. But not every comment was easy. In the hallway, a classmate muttered loud enough for them to hear. Must be nice to get famous just for getting kicked off a plane. Arielle turned, but didn't fire back. She'd learned something important. Not everyone would understand, and not everyone needed to. But she also knew this wasn't about fame. It was about visibility. Because what happened to them had happened to so many others, just without cameras, without a father with power, without a system that could be triggered into action. The robotics competition was still on. Despite the chaos of the past week, their team had qualified for the National Robotics Showcase in New York. Principal Evans insisted the school would fund the trip fully, no matter the budget strain. You girls represent all of us now, she said. We're not letting this moment pass quietly. At home that night, their dad sat them down. You don't have to go, Marcus said softly. You've already made your mark. But Anaya leaned forward. Dad, we didn't build that bot for press conferences. We built it to compete. Arielle added, and if we stop now, they win. Marcus smiled for the first time in days. Not the political smile, the real one, the father one. Then let's get you there. The journey to New York this time was different. They flew private, not because they wanted luxury, but because the system their father helped freeze still hadn't fully recovered. Most of the affected airlines were still under federal ethics review. Ticket sales had plummeted. Gate agents had been suspended. Pilots were speaking out. In the private terminal, the girls noticed something they hadn't expected: fear. Airport staff greeted them carefully, eyes down, smiles polite but forced, as if afraid they'd do something wrong again. Anaya whispered, "It's like the world's holding its breath." Arielle squeezed her hand. "Let them. We're not here for them." When they landed in New York, press lined up outside the competition hall. But inside, between rows of glowing drones, humming bots, and excited teens from around the country, the air felt normal again. It smelled like solder and coffee. It buzzed with coding jokes and whispered strategy. They were back in their element. Their bot, nicknamed Rebalance, was a marvel. A self-stabilizing delivery unit that could course-correct mid-movement based on real-time feedback from its environment. "Kinda like us," Arielle joked as they powered it up. Anaya grinned. "We don't need permission, we just adapt." The competition was brutal. They faced teams from elite academies, private STEM schools, even one from Japan that had brought a multilingual AI-powered rover. But the sisters didn't flinch. They had something none of the other teams did. Momentum powered by purpose. Their final round was a timed relay challenge. Bots had to navigate an obstacle course, pick up coded packages, and deliver them to precise coordinates. Midway through, a glitch in their infrared sensor threatened to throw them off completely, but Anaya spotted it instantly. "Recalibrate, Route B." Arielle didn't hesitate. "Switch to manual override." They adapted, and they won. As they stood on stage, holding their championship medals, the crowd roared. But Arielle only heard one voice in her head, her mother's. "The world may try to deny you entry, baby girl, but you define the destination." That night, a new message was posted to the girl's social media account. No sponsors, no hashtags, no corporate tags, just a caption. "We didn't come to break the system, we came to outgrow it." And the photo? 2 girls, standing in the airport lobby, back straight, medals shining, in front of a flight board that read, "Cancelled, cancelled, cancelled, rebalance, cleared for takeoff." The Monday after the competition felt surreal. At 8:03 a.m., Arielle and Anaya walked through the school's front doors. Medals still packed away in their backpacks, hoodies pulled up, trying to pretend they hadn't just become national news. But there was no hiding. As they stepped into the hall, students burst into spontaneous applause. Some held up printed signs, "Rebalance equals resistance," and "They tried to stop you. You rewired the world." Even the teachers were smiling like proud parents. Ms. Patel, their computer science teacher, stepped out of her classroom. "Can I just say, you girls didn't just win a trophy, you rewrote the whole damn narrative." Arielle blinked. "We just wanted to build something." Anaya added quietly, "We didn't mean to start a movement." Ms. Patel grinned. "That's the best kind. The kind that starts with purpose, not ego." Meanwhile, across the country, not everyone was smiling. In a downtown Los Angeles conference room, a group of airline executives were reviewing emergency data from the FAA's Ethics Compliance Index. And it wasn't pretty. Passenger trust had dropped 18% industry-wide. First-class bookings by under 18 passengers of color had decreased by 32%. 12 airports had suspended auto clearance privileges from partner airlines, but the worst was still coming. A notification blinked on the screen. "Alert Brooks Protocol, Phase 2. Scheduled for enforcement on Friday, 12:00 a.m. SST." The CFO swore under his breath. "He's really doing it. Marcus is pushing it industry-wide." The CEO stared at the screen. "He's not just a CEO," she muttered. "He's turning into a regulator." At home, Marcus Brooks was doing something far less dramatic. He was making pancakes. Anaya sat at the counter, hair still messy from sleep, scrolling through her tablet. "Dad, we got an interview request from The Daily Show. You cool with that?" Marcus flipped a pancake. "Depends. Do they want the girls who built a robot or the girls who broke the airline industry?" Arielle came in, yawning. "Probably both." Marcus smiled, but his eyes were tired. He'd spent the weekend fielding calls from federal agencies, ESG ethics boards, even airline CEOs who were suddenly very eager to collaborate on industry reform. But he didn't want to talk about that today. Today was for syrup and slow mornings. Eat first, he said. Change the world later. Later that afternoon, the girls received an unexpected email. Subject line, "We owe you more than an apology, sender." Rita L. Hammond, Chief Ethics Officer, Mid-Atlantic Airlines, Anaya, opened it first. "Whoa, it's a direct invite." Arielle leaned over. "To what?" "To a private roundtable. Senior airline leadership, no press, no PR, just conversation." It wasn't an apology. It was an invitation to change the system from inside the room. The roundtable took place 2 days later, inside a sleek conference room in DC, lined with frosted glass walls and minimalist art. There were no reporters, no microphones, no carefully worded statements. Just Marcus, his daughters, and a dozen of the most powerful executives in the aviation world. And silence. Until Rita Hammond spoke. "On behalf of Mid-Atlantic Airlines and our partners, I want to say this plainly. We failed, and we're not here to defend that. We're here to ask, if you were us, what would you build differently?" Arielle's eyebrows raised. "You want our ideas?" Rita nodded. "You built a robot that course corrects in real time. We're hoping you can help us build a company that does the same." The conversation lasted 3 hours, and Arielle and Anaya didn't hold back. They proposed real-time ethics sensors embedded in gate agent systems, flagging repeat offenders automatically, anonymous passengers scoring audits to track bias patterns, AI-facilitated voice logs that could verify passenger tone and interaction without relying on human memory, teen-centered oversight councils to report discrimination without adult mediation. By the end, the room wasn't silent anymore. It was electric. One exec leaned over and whispered to Marcus, "Your daughters just did more in 3 hours than our consultants did in 6 months." Marcus simply said, "That's because they're not trying to protect a system, they're trying to fix one." By Friday morning, the headlines shifted. Mid-Atlantic launches Rebalance Initiative, co-designed by teens who sparked Movement Airlines to roll out gate ethics monitoring at 37 airports, new federal oversight committee announced, led by Marcus Brooks. And one unexpected twist. Anaya and Arielle Brooks joined National Youth Aviation Council as first co-chairs. That weekend, the girls finally got a moment to breathe. No cameras, no press. Just the two of them sitting on the roof, watching the city lights flicker like code blinking across a motherboard. Anaya looked up at the sky. "It's weird," she whispered. "We spent so much time trying to get on that one flight." Arielle smiled. "And now we're clearing runways for everyone else." For a while, they just sat there, until Anaya broke the silence. "I used to think the system was the enemy, but maybe it's just a tool, and tools need builders." Arielle nodded slowly. "Yeah, and maybe we were born to build." The school auditorium was packed. What was originally supposed to be a quiet assembly to recognize the Brooks twins for their robotics championship had morphed into something bigger, way bigger. Now it was a full-blown televised town hall. Cameras from Telltales and other platforms lined the back wall. The mayor had shown up. So had representatives from the Department of Education. There were parents, students, school board officials, and even 2 women from the FAA's ethics division sitting stiffly in the front row. And in the center of it all sat 2 13-year-old girls in matching silver sneakers and black jackets, quietly fidgeting with their hands. Arielle leaned toward Anaya and whispered, "This doesn't feel like a celebration." Anaya nodded slowly. "Feels like they want us to be the face of something we didn't sign up for." The lights dimmed. Principal Evans stepped up to the mic. "Today, we're not just honoring victory in robotics. We're recognizing resilience, brilliance, and the refusal to be reduced to a seat assignment. The crowd clapped, but the girls barely smiled. Arielle thought back to that airport gate. How small they'd felt, how helpless. The gate agent's tone, the lack of eye contact, the way the world seemed to shrink around them, fast. It was surreal how that single moment had unraveled so much and rebuilt even more. When it was their turn to speak, they walked up together. No script, no fancy notes, just their voices. Anaya started. "We weren't supposed to win this way. We were just trying to catch a flight." Arielle followed. "We didn't plan to become symbols. We didn't ask to trigger investigations. We just didn't want to be erased." The auditorium fell into a heavy silence. Arielle glanced across the crowd. Some parents looked uncomfortable. A teacher dabbed her eyes. One of the FAA reps leaned forward slightly, listening more intently than before. Then Anaya said something that made the whole room shift. "The funny thing is, that flight was delayed anyway. All that stress, all that shouting, all that power flexed just to keep 2 kids off a plane, only for the plane to sit on the tarmac for 40 minutes. It's like the system knew it was wrong before the people did." Later, as they stepped off stage, a local reporter approached them. "You girls think change is actually happening, or is this all just theater?" Arielle didn't hesitate. "We don't need them to act perfect. We need them to act accountable," Anaya added. "Theater ends when the curtain drops. We're still building what comes after." The next day, a surprise arrived at their house. It wasn't from the airline. Not directly. It was a small box, wrapped in gray and white paper. No note, no return address. Just 2 items inside. A custom first-class boarding pass, never activated, with their names embossed in gold. A small printed card that simply read, "For the flight that never took off, you did." Their dad found them sitting at the dining table later, quietly staring at the box. "You okay?" he asked. Arielle shrugged. "Feels weird, like they're trying to undo it with a trinket." Anaya tapped the pass. "We didn't ask for this." Marcus nodded and sat down across from them. "Do you remember the story of David and Goliath?" Both girls looked confused. Marcus smiled. "Everyone thinks the story is about David beating a giant, but the real power was in the moment David walked onto the field, the courage to step into a space you were never meant to win." He paused, then added, "You girls didn't just throw a stone. You shifted the ground under the whole system." And that's when Arielle said it, soft, almost to herself. "Sometimes I think God made us twins so we wouldn't have to walk through fire alone." Marcus didn't speak. He just reached across the table and held their hands. On Monday, the headlines returned, but this time for something entirely different. Breaking. Marcus Brooks. Appointed Chair of National Passenger Ethics Commission, first action, launch of ClearGate, a real-time passenger rights dashboard to be installed in 42 airports nationwide. And then came the big one, $940 million in corporate ESG funds to be rerouted based on new gate compliance ratings. It wasn't just a headline. It was a shift in power. The same power that once silenced 2 black girls at an airport gate was now being rewired to protect them, and every passenger liked them. But not everyone was happy. That afternoon, at a closed-door session of the Aviation Lobby Alliance, top airline executives argued about what came next. Are we really going to let 2 kids and their dad dictate compliance standards? One executive slammed his folder shut. "We didn't let them do anything. We ignored the warning signs until they burned through $940 million in funding," another added. "And now every investor's asking the same question. Why were we caught off guard?" Across the room, a younger VP stood quietly. Then she said something that made the room fall still. "Because we built gates. They built networks." Back in Silver Spring, Arielle and Anaya were sitting in their bedroom, legs crossed on the floor, surrounded by sketches and wires and open laptops. They weren't thinking about speeches or headlines. They were already designing their next bot. It should be able to predict real-time behavioral shifts in high-stress environments. Anaya said. Arielle nodded. And trigger a response to redirect or de-escalate. No need for human bias. Name? Arielle looked up, then smiled. Goliath, because this time, he's on our side. The morning of the ClearGate launch was quiet, but not inside Arielle and Anaya's house. The living room looked like a production studio. Bright lights, 2 cameras, a full audio rig, and 3 producers from the Telltales network moving briskly with clipboards and tangled wires. Their dad paced nervously in the kitchen, phone glued to his ear. On the counter sat 3 sealed briefcases containing the ClearGate encryption modules, each protected by biometric ID and timed deployment triggers. They looked more like something from a spy film than a software rollout. Anaya peeked into the kitchen. Dad, you okay? Marcus turned and gave a half smile. Just trying to make sure the entire aviation industry doesn't melt down in the next 4 hours. Arielle laughed. You say that like it's a bad thing. Meanwhile, the twins were getting ready for their first ever joint live stream. One that would be broadcast in over 200 public schools and 37 airport terminals across the country. The topic? Not just passengers, what we deserve in transit spaces. The title had been Anaya's idea. We're not cargo, she'd said. We're human, and we have the right to be treated like it. The live stream began at exactly 9:00 a.m. Eastern. Arielle looked straight into the camera. I want to tell you a story. She paused. It's not about a robot. It's not even really about a flight. It's about what happens when people think silence is the same thing as safety. Then Anaya took over. 2 girls, 2 seats, 1 gate agent who thought power meant permission. We didn't scream. We didn't break anything. We just asked a question. Why not us? The chat flooded instantly with thousands of comments. Why not us? My daughter is watching from Atlanta. She's crying. At not just passengers trending in 5 states already. This is more than a story. This is a shift. While the girls spoke, the ClearGate modules were remotely activated at 6 pilot airports: JFK, New York LAX, Los Angeles ATL, Atlanta ORD, Chicago DFW, Dallas DCA, Washington DC. Within minutes, new interface screens appeared on gate agents' terminals. Live ethics score meters, interaction flagging tools, and auto-record pop-ups when behavioral thresholds were triggered. It was the first real-time ethics system for airline staff ever deployed, and it started with 2 13-year-old girls who refused to sit down. Back at home, the Telltales producers wrapped the stream and immediately pulled Marcus aside. We need a follow-up piece, one said. This story isn't ending, it's just mutating. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Mutating? The other producer explained, you have whistleblowers now. Gate agents from other airlines are coming forward, saying they've been told to subtly discourage kids of color from sitting in first class, especially when traveling alone. Marcus went silent. Then, get them on camera. We're not asking for favors. We're demanding daylight. The very next morning, ClearGate confessions trended nationwide. One anonymous agent admitted, I was trained to ask more questions if the kid looked like they didn't belong. It was unspoken, but very real. Another, we called it the mirror test. If a kid couldn't picture themselves in first class, neither could we. And a third, I denied a 9-year-old once because her hair was messy and she had a backpack. I still see her face. The comments section exploded. Not just passengers, not just mistakes. This is a system wired for rejection. Telltales is exposing the real cost of bias. Meanwhile, at FAA headquarters, the board convened an emergency session. ClearGate was now active. Whistleblowers were speaking, and investor calls were flooding in, asking one question. Are we funding discrimination? The FAA's interim director, Lauren Covington, looked around the room. We have a choice, she said. We can wait for public rage to rewrite policy for us, or we can lead the rewrite ourselves. Then she held up a single sheet of paper, a proposed draft of a new regulatory mandate, the Flight Integrity Reform Act. Proposed by Brooks, M. Co-authors. Brooks, A. Arielle. Brooks, A. Anaya. She smiled. The god of this new system? It's data, and we finally have a generation that knows how to wield it. At school, the twins couldn't walk 5 steps without someone stopping them. Can I get your autograph? Will ClearGate work in trains too? Can you teach me coding after school? One 4th grader approached them shyly and handed over a paper airplane made from a printed headline that read, "Twin sisters ground 940 millimoles worth of flights and still finish their homework." On the wings, he'd written, "You're not passengers, you're pilots." They kept that paper airplane taped to their bedroom wall. That weekend, the mayor of Silver Spring hosted a citywide community celebration in honor of the girls. But it wasn't just balloons and cupcakes. They unveiled a new initiative, the Arielle and Anaya Transit Equity Youth Fund, a $6 million grant for young inventors, engineers, and advocates working to make public transportation more equitable, accessible, and inclusive. The crowd roared as the girls took the stage. Arielle whispered to Anaya, "This is bigger than us now." Anaya whispered back, "It always was. We just didn't have clearance to see it before." Later that night, the house was quiet again. Marcus sat in the dark, watching the replay of their live stream. The part where Arielle says, "Silence isn't safety." He reached for his journal, something he hadn't done in years, and wrote, "They weren't just my daughters on that flight. They were every kid who's ever been told, 'Not your seat.'" They didn't just take back their boarding pass, they built a runway for all of us. It was never supposed to reach the Senate floor. But by midweek, the Flight Integrity Reform Act, drafted by Marcus Brooks and co-authored with his daughters, was officially on the docket for federal hearing. The moment Arielle saw the news alert pop up on her phone, she froze. "Anaya," she called out, voice just above a whisper. "They're actually doing it. Capitol Hill." Her sister looked up from her laptop, stunned. "We're in the bill?" "No," Arielle said, holding back a grin. "We are the bill." The following Monday, the Brooks family was invited to Washington. It wasn't for a ceremony. It was for testimony. The hearing was closed door for security reasons, but word had already spread. 2 middle schoolers were about to testify on airline ethics before a panel of U.S. senators and transportation regulators. Marcus had been here before. Years ago, as a tech ethics advisor for the FAA, he had testified on AI use in commercial aviation. But back then, the stakes had been theoretical. This time, the stakes had names, faces, 13-year-old voices, and a 940 millimolar disruption that had forced the entire transportation industry to reckon with its reflection. That morning, Arielle wore her lucky hoodie, the one with "Code Like a Girl" embroidered on the sleeve. Anaya wore her Robotics Club pin, the one she'd won before all of this started. They held hands as they entered the building. Reporters shouted questions, even though no one was allowed in. A security guard whispered, "You girls got this," and gave them a quick wink. Inside, the room was surprisingly cold, intimidating in its formality. Thick carpet, polished wood, nameplates. A row of suits who had the power to delay, delete, or derail everything. Senator Maxfield opened the floor. "We're here today to consider the viability and implementation of ClearGate, an ethics oversight system triggered by a now viral incident involving 2 young passengers. Miss Brooks, the floor is yours." Anaya nudged her sister gently. "You start." Arielle stepped forward and spoke clearly into the mic. "I'm 13. I code after school. I like grilled cheese and I hate math tests. I also know what it's like to be told I don't belong before I even speak." She looked up. "I'm not here because I want a headline. I'm here because someone decided I wasn't worth a boarding pass." Anaya followed, voice slightly shaking at first, but then finding rhythm. "When we got denied, no one asked what we'd done. They just assumed we had done something. That's not a mistake. That's a design. For the next hour, they answered every question thrown their way. How does ClearGate prevent abuse? What happens if a passenger falsely flags staff? What metrics are you tracking? And the toughest one, do you think one incident justifies a system-wide overhaul? Anaya leaned forward. We think every incident is a blueprint for change. Ours just happened to be caught. Arielle added, and if this system prevents one kid from being humiliated, isn't that worth it? After the hearing, the senators exited through a side door, but one, a woman with salt and pepper hair and sharp glasses, paused at the end of the table. She turned to the girls and said quietly, 30 years ago, I was denied entry to a flight while holding a U.S. Senate intern badge. They said my ID didn't match the seat. I never told anyone. I just swallowed it. She held up the printed draft of the bill. You didn't swallow it. You rewrote it. Then she left without another word. By Friday, the bill had passed through initial review with full bipartisan support. ClearGate was now being prepped for national deployment. That night, Marcus sat the girls down. You do understand what happens next, right? They nodded. Pushback, Arielle said. Noise, Anaya added. Threats, Marcus said quietly. Not just to the tech, to your character, your stories. The girls didn't flinch. We're not passengers anymore, Anaya said. We stay at the gate. Over the weekend, the internet split. Most praised the bill. Others attacked it and them. Some called it overreach. Some called it woke coding. Some asked if two 13-year-old black girls could really understand what they were doing. To which Arielle replied, on a now viral live stream, you didn't ask if the man who denied us boarding understood what he was doing. You only question intelligence when it comes from girls who look like us. In response to mounting questions, the FAA released a 42-page white paper showing that over 67% of recorded gate escalations in the past 10 years involved passengers of color, most under the age of 25. Less than 4% resulted in any accountability. ClearGate, in just its first week of pilot testing, had already flagged 38 interactions that would have previously gone unreported. System failure wasn't random, the paper read. It was engineered through omission, and then came the moment no one expected. The CEO of Jetfront Airlines, one of the largest in the country, resigned publicly during a press conference, holding up a ClearGate compliance report showing their airline ranked dead last among the Big Five. I ignored the signs, he said. I ignored the whistleblowers. I ignored two girls. He handed the mic to the new interim CEO, a black woman who had started as a flight attendant 20 years earlier. I didn't come here to clean up a mess, she said. I came here to make sure it never happens again. Back in Silver Spring, the girls returned to school, to robotics practice, to homework, to after-school smoothies with extra whipped cream. They weren't trying to be famous. They were just trying to build something that lasted. Their dad called it the legacy you don't plan for, but you choose to carry anyway. One day, Arielle found a handwritten note slipped into her locker. It read, "They denied you boarding, so you redesigned the runway. Thank you." A month after the incident, Arielle and Anaya stood in front of a packed auditorium at the annual Telltales Youth Ethics Forum. What had once been a simple school presentation was now a national keynote. The crowd was standing room only. Students, parents, educators, and executives all gathered under one roof, eager to hear from the two girls who had disrupted an entire system and rebuilt it. Arielle stepped up to the mic first. I used to think justice was about punishing people who did wrong, she said. But now I think real justice is about fixing the machine that let it happen in the first place. The crowd went still. Then Anaya added, that flight didn't just deny us seats. It gave us blueprints. The applause was thunderous. But what happened after the speech mattered even more. In a private breakout session, Arielle and Anaya unveiled the ClearGate public portal, a live-access dashboard that allowed verified passengers to anonymously rate their flight experience based on dignity, bias, and safety. For the first time ever, passengers, especially young, disabled, or marginalized travelers, could be heard in real time, and their voices would influence airline accountability metrics directly. Arielle turned to the crowd and smiled. You're not just passengers anymore. Within 72 hours of the portal launch, over 1.2 million submissions poured in. Not complaints, data. And data, Marcus always said, doesn't just inform systems, it forces them to evolve. By week's end, the FAA held a press conference. With 84 airports now integrated into ClearGate systems, they announced the passage of a new federal rule, the Passenger Ethics Accountability Standard, or PEAS. Every airline operating on U.S. soil would now be required to install real-time behavioral logging at gates and crew check-ins, implement mandatory quarterly ethics training, and submit their ethics compliance reports publicly through ClearGate. Refusal to comply would trigger funding freezes, route suspensions, or both. It was the largest regulatory shift in commercial aviation since post-9/11 security reform. And it started with a gate, 2 kids, and one father who decided his silence would not protect them. Back at home, Marcus watched the news in quiet disbelief. Not pride. Something deeper. Relief. His daughters had lived through something many adults would have crumbled under. And they hadn't just survived it. They'd turned it into law. One evening, just after dinner, Arielle asked him, "Dad, was it supposed to happen like this?" He looked at her for a long moment. "No," he said softly, "but maybe it was supposed to happen through you." She nodded, biting her lip. "Feels weird, being known for something that hurt." Anaya joined her on the couch. "Yeah, but we made it mean something. That's different." Marcus pulled them both in. "You didn't just rewrite a policy," he said. "You rewrote how the world sees kids like you. And girls like you," he added, "and passengers like you." Meanwhile, at Skylink Aviation, the airline responsible for the original incident, things had changed dramatically. Their entire executive team had been replaced. A new CEO was appointed, a black woman named Charlene Maddox, a former gate agent turned operations director who had spent 2 decades fighting for frontline staff and passengers alike. Her first action? She signed a binding ClearGate partnership agreement, voluntarily exceeding the federal standards and pledging $25 annually toward anti-bias training and tech development. In her press release, she said, "Skylink failed, but thanks to 2 girls, we're learning how to fly right again." 2 months later, Arielle and Anaya were nominated for the Presidential Medal of Youth Impact, the highest honor given to American citizens under 18 for outstanding public service. They didn't care about medals, but they did care about what the award meant for other kids watching. Kids who had been silenced, dismissed, denied. Kids who now had a mirror and saw possibility staring back. One day, after school, Anaya found a package waiting at their doorstep. No return address, no note. Inside, a first-class boarding pass, stamped, signed, framed. It read, "This seat was always yours, America." The airport looked different now. Not the terminals, not the signage, but the feeling. It was subtle. Quieter voices behind the counter. A flight attendant kneeling beside a young boy in a wheelchair instead of brushing past him. A TSA agent nodding gently at an elderly woman who didn't speak much English. It wasn't perfect, but it was changing. And that was everything. Arielle and Anaya walked side by side toward Gate 21A. It had been 3 months since that day. The day they were denied boarding, humiliated, told to stand over there like they didn't matter. But this time, they were invited. This time, they were the moment. Their faces had appeared on the front of Time for Teens. Their ClearGate portal had been adopted by 19 major airlines. Their ethics standard had become the baseline for aviation contracts across the U.S. But none of that compared to this, returning, not as passengers, but as honored guests. As the girls approached the gate, the overhead screen didn't show a departure. It showed, "Celebrating the Passenger Dignity Act, honoring Arielle and Anaya Brooks." Reporters gathered, but they were instructed to observe, not interrupt. This wasn't a media stunt. It was a ceremony. The FAA commissioner stepped forward first. "Today," she said, "we don't just mark a legislative win. We mark a cultural correction." Then came the surprise. A plaque was unveiled beside the gate door. It read, "This gate was once the site of exclusion. Now, it stands for access. For every passenger who's ever been told they didn't belong, this is yours." Arielle blinked fast, her throat tight. She looked down at Anaya, who was holding it together, barely. "You okay?" she whispered. "Yeah," Anaya said. "Just didn't think we'd ever see this." Then came a voice behind them, warm and firm. "You earned it." It was Charlene Maddox, the new Skylink CEO, standing with a folded scarf in her hands. Navy blue, the same kind flight attendants wore. "I want to give you something," she said. "These were redesigned last week. First batch out the box." She handed them the scarf. "But only if you promise to keep flying forward." Arielle took it gently. "We're not done," she said. Charlene smiled. "Good. Neither are we." That afternoon, the girls boarded a special commemorative flight, Flight 940, a number chosen intentionally to reflect the 940 MUs in frozen funds that forced the industry to take notice. As they stepped onto the plane, every crew member greeted them with a small bow. No fanfare, just quiet, genuine acknowledgement. Halfway through the flight, the captain made an announcement. "To all passengers on board today, you're sitting in a moment that didn't exist a year ago, because two girls decided they were worth more than silence." A hush settled over the cabin, and for once, it felt like the sky itself paused to listen. When they landed, Marcus was waiting at the gate. Tears welled in his eyes as his daughters walked toward him. He didn't say anything at first. He just opened his arms. And for a moment, they stood there, father and daughters, wrapped in a silence that felt like peace. Not revenge, not victory, just peace. Later that night, as the girls sat in their room, Arielle turned off the lights and looked up at the ceiling. "Do you think anyone will even remember this in 5 years?" she asked. Anaya rolled over. "I don't care if they remember us. I care if they remember what happened." Arielle thought about that for a while, then whispered, "One day, someone will try to erase our seats again, but this time, they'll find our names already carved into the gate." 6 months had passed. The media buzz had quieted. The headlines faded. But the movement? It was just getting started. Across airports in the US, signs began to appear above boarding zones. They were simple, white background, bold lettering. "Dignity is a boarding requirement." Underneath, a small QR code linking directly to ClearGate. For most travelers, it became part of the background. But for some, it meant everything. A girl in a wheelchair smiled when an agent knelt to speak to her face to face. A boy with darker skin than everyone else in the lounge finally got served. First, a mom traveling with her nonverbal son cried quietly when the gate crew offered sensory headphones without her asking. Things were shifting. Not perfect, but finally seen. Back in D.C., Arielle and Anaya sat with Marcus in a coffee shop near Capitol Hill. They had just left a meeting with the Senate Ethics Committee. It wasn't just ceremonial this time. They were helping to draft a national framework called Passenger Bill of Human Dignity, a charter designed to become federal law within the year. Marcus looked at his daughters across the table. They weren't just the girls from the flight anymore. They were founders, builders, voices, and they had changed the airspace for good. Later that night, Arielle opened her laptop and logged into ClearGate. A notification popped up. New message. "You changed everything for me." She clicked. It was from a 12-year-old girl in Kansas City, black, first time flying. Her message read, "They almost skipped me at check-in, but I remembered your story. I opened the ClearGate app, and guess what? The agent backed off. You didn't just fight for your seat. You left one behind for me." Arielle stared at the screen, then whispered, "That's why we did it." The next day, Anaya posted a video on the official ClearGate channel. It wasn't scripted. Just her on the porch, hair pulled back, hoodie on. She looked right into the camera and said, "If you've ever been made to feel small, if someone ever told you you don't belong here, just know your seat is still here and you don't need permission to claim it." In the first 12 hours, it had over 3.7 million views. And counting. People weren't just watching. They were telling their own stories, sharing photos of gate changes, thanking unseen kids for unseen courage. As the sun set that evening, Arielle sat by her window. She thought about how a single no had unraveled so much pain, but also rewoven a new path, and how sometimes God doesn't show up in thunder or fire, but in the quiet conviction of two girls who just won't back down. Have you ever been made to feel like you didn't belong just because of how you look, how old you are, or where you come from? What would you do if someone tried to take your seat in life? Let us know in the comments. We rate every story, and if you believe every kid deserves to be seen, heard, and respected, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs to know. You don't need permission to take your seat. We'll see you in the next Telltales.